This is everything a beginner needs to know about layers in Photoshop. All right, so once you have Photoshop open, we all know that you can either create a new file or open something that exists already like an image. But either way, so if I create a new file, I'm just going to leave everything the same here. You're going to see that your layers are going to show up down here, and it's going to start with one background layer that's just a blank canvas. If we did the other way, which was to open something up, so I'll go to open and open an image, the exact same thing will happen in your layers over here. This time, instead of a blank canvas, it'll actually be the image that you opened up. So the first thing I'm going to officially show you about layers is how to create or add all the different types of layers. Okay, so if you want to add an image layer in here, you can do it one of two ways. You can go over to another project that you have open. So I have two tabs open here. This was that other one that I showed you. All you have to do is click on the image, drag it over to the other tab, your project tab, drag it back in. I still have the click held down and then let go. And that'll bring that over here, and you can see that we now have layer 1, which is that image. I'm just going to double click in here to name it, so you can rename layers. I'm going to call it Steph 1. You can also, on that other project, if you have something else open, you can select all, and that'll select everything, and then just go edit, copy, or control C, and then go over to your main project, and then go edit, paste, or control V. And that'll put that image in there as well. You can see it's now called layer 1 because I renamed that one, but I'm going to call this one Steph 2. You can also take a part of an image. So I'm just going to go over here to the quick selection tool, go to select subject, and you can see that it'll create a selection of just the subject. And you can click this little button here, which is a mask. That'll take away the background, and then you can do either one of the first two things that we did. So I'm just going to go to the Move tool, click, drag them over here, and drop them in. You can also go up to File, down to Place Embedded, and then pick an image. I'm going to pick a different Steph image this time. And then you can resize and stuff from there, but I'm just going to leave it, and then go up here when you're good and click Check to apply it. And then the fifth and kind of final basic way to bring images into Photoshop to make them layers is just to open up File Explorer, click on your image, and drag it in. And then it'll do the exact same thing as Place Embedded, and then just click Check again. Now, images aren't the only types of layers we can have in Photoshop, though. We can also go to, let's say, the Shape tool right here. So right now it's on Rectangle. If I right-click, you can pick something else. So let's go Ellipse. And you'll notice that if I draw something, boom, it'll create a new layer right there that's called Ellipse. The exact same thing will happen with the Type tool over here. So if I click on that and then just click somewhere, oh, you can see it's highlight it and make it a little bit smaller so we can actually see it. So text right there. And you can see right here that it's a new layer called text, or it'll be called whatever you type in there. If we scoot over to the bottom right here, underneath where our layers are, you can see a bunch of different options down at the bottom. This plus with the box in it is a new blank layer. So if I click on that, you'll see it's just a blank layer. Now, what's significant about a blank layer is that if we go back over to our tools over here, that's where you can do something like maybe go to the brush tool right here, and I'm just gonna make it a different color that you can draw. And while it might look like you're drawing on the other layers, remember it's actually on the blank layer, not on any of these. So if I click this eyeball, which we'll come back to in a second, it'll hide that layer, and you can see that it's actually contained all on the blank layer and is not impacting any of the other layers right here. And just so you know, the brush tool is not the only thing you can use on a blank layer. If I add another one, another common thing is maybe like the gradient tool. So I'll click on that. I'll leave this up there, and you can just draw a gradient on it like that, and that'll put it on its own layer right there. If we go back down here and move one over, you can see that this one is to create a new group or a folder. So if I click on that, you'll see it's a folder up here. And basically that just means that you can add things into the folder. So maybe I want to move this folder down to here, and then I can click and then hold Control and then click on all the layers that I want to bring in to that folder. We'll come back to that Control click thing in a second. And I can just click and drag those into that group. You can see they indented a little bit, and now I can close that down and maybe call this just Steph Pics. If we move one more over right here, this little half circle thing, this is your adjustment layers. So if you click on that, you're going to see a menu, like a drop-down menu that comes up with a bunch of different options. And any one that you click, they all kind of do something different. So I'm just going to pick a curves, for example. You'll see that the curves layer will show up top here. And there's just kind of adjustments that you can make with each of those. That's why they're adjustment layers. So if I crank this, you can see that curves can make things brighter, darker. You can change the contrast and, different things within there, but this isn't a curves tutorial. If I go back down, I'll add another one. So let's try a hue saturation. You can see it's got different options this time. And if I slide this, you can see the colors will change based on these two sliders here. So red is turning into red right now. But if I slide it over here, it's saying that anything that was red will turn to blue and so on. And that's about it for the different types of layers that you can add. Just so you know, these two ones down here, so this is a mask and these are your layer styles. These are things that you can do to your layers, but they're not layers themselves. Next, I'm just going to show you all the fundamental things you need to know about managing and dealing with your layers, starting with how to name your layers, because I've already shown you that a bunch of times. So all you have to do is double click and then type in what you want. So I'm just going to call it gradient new and then click away when you're done. Something else that I've shown you is this eyeball to the side here. So if you click on an eyeball, then that layer is going to disappear. So I took away the hue saturation, I took away the curves, I took away the gradient, and then we're back seeing all these other things that we have here. So I'm going to put those back for just a second. You can also hold Alt or Option and click on any individual layer. So if I want to see this one only, if I hold Alt or Option and then click on that, every other layer is going to disappear. Now, this eyeball stayed with the folder because if the folder disappeared, then everything in the folder would disappear as well. So it kept the eyeball there, but it only kept this one. So now I see that image, if that's all I wanted to see, and then hold Alt or Option, click on it again, and then everything else will pop back in. If there's a layer you want to get rid of, like delete, that you don't want anymore, you can click on it. So since I have two of these Steph images, you just click on it and then go to the trash can right here and click delete. Then click yes right there, or don't show again if you don't want. Click yes. You can also just click and drag a layer to the trash can and boom, it'll go away as well. Or you can even just click on a layer and hit backspace or delete. Now, before I show you how to rearrange your layers, I just want to make sure you understand that whatever's at the very top here, that's going to be whatever's in the very front within our canvas. And whatever's at the bottom is going to be behind everything else. So when we're rearranging things here, you have to keep that in mind. So if I want to move text to the very front so I can actually see it, I would just click on that layer and then click and drag it. So you see those blue lines there? Click it so it's at the very top and then let go. And then now we'll see text because it's now above the gradient and the adjustment layers here. So in this case, I actually want to move gradient down in between the two Steph images. So it's above this one, in front of it, and underneath or behind this Steph image. So the gradient's kind of sandwiched in between. I'm going to move this curves layer down there as well, and hue saturation, because if you notice that when hue saturation was above everything else, it was actually impacting every single thing below it. So hue saturation right now is impacting everything but text. So if I bring it, look at the color of the brush right now, it's kind of a green. That's because hue saturation is messing with it. If I bring hue saturation below brush, now it goes back to that original blue because it's not impacting it anymore. So any adjustment layer will impact everything below it. So I'm going to bring hue saturation back down so it's below this Steph because I don't want that one to be impacted. But it's gonna, eventually I'm gonna show you something else, that it's gonna impact just this Steph down here. I also want this ellipse to be below Steph as well, but I don't want it impacted by hue saturation, so I'll keep it above there. And in fact, I don't even want this brush layer anymore, so I'm gonna click on it and delete that one, get rid of it as well. If you wanted to select and or move multiple layers at the same time, you can do it in several different ways. You can click on one layer, hold Control or Command, and then click on the other layers that you want to select. Now when you move them, they'll move together. I'm just going to leave mine right there. You can also click on a top layer, like the top layer that you want to select, hold Shift, and then click on the lowest layer that you want to select, and then it'll select everything in between. So for example, if I went up to text right here and held shift and clicked on Steph, it would select everything in between. To duplicate layers, just click on the layer and then go Command or Control J, or right click and go up to duplicate layer right here, duplicate layer, click OK. To impact the position of the layer on the canvas, you can either select on the layer right here. So if I select this layer, or let's say I select text, and then make sure you're on your move tool, and then you can just click on it and move it wherever you want. So maybe I'll put it right down there for now. Or you can simply click on the canvas, and you can see that when I clicked on Steph there, it jumped down to this one because that's the top layer that we can select, and you can click and move that one. So now if I click on this one, it'll select the next one below, and I can move that one over here. So maybe I click down here. So you can just click on the actual thing on the canvas and move it wherever you want. That's what you do if you'd want to change the size of something as well. So I click on this ellipse right here. It's selected right there, and go Command or Control T, and then I can, resize and rotate and do other things within Free Transform there, and click check to apply. But really the most important thing to remember here is just to be selected on the proper layer that you want to impact, especially if you're going to be putting on, let's say, image adjustments from here, or let's say like a filter. Maybe you go down to like blur and Gaussian blur, and you think you're going to be blurring the background or something, and you've blurred out your main image. You're like, what? Why is it blurring that part of the image? I wanted to do the background. And you click OK and you're confused. It's probably because you're selected on the wrong layer. I was still on step 3 here. So if I go Control or Command Z to go back, if I wanted to do something to the actual gradient, I got to make sure I'm selected on the gradient and not some other layer. Next, let's talk about these 3 drop-down menus right here. The first one right here are your blend modes. So right now it's on normal, and right now I'm selected on the gradient because you're going to see why in just a second. If you click on that, there's a whole bunch of other options, and as I scroll through, you can see that the original image of Steph is now showing up in the background because these are blend modes. So it's now blending whatever layer is selected on, in this case my gradient, with the layers below. So I'm kind of going through here, and I'm going to pick something, let's just say, I don't know, screen. I'm going to click that one, and you can see that with screen, the blend mode screen applied to gradient, it is now blended in that way. Each of these has a different thing that they do. So screen is now blending through to this Steph image. And now I can maybe go back to this hue saturation by double clicking on this little box there and, playing with the colors to get, something maybe more golden statey, like maybe like that. Next is opacity over here. So I'm going to click on the side 2 Stephs. I'm going to go to this one, and all you have to do is click and then use this slider. So the lower you go, like if I go down to 0, that means it's completely see-through. Obviously 50% or so would be kind of halfway through. So I'm going to go to about 40% on that one. You can also, I'm going to click on this other one to show you. So I'll click on this one. It's now on this Steph. You can also just click on the word opacity and slide to the left or to the right as well. So this one I'm going to make about 60% or so. So it's a little more visible than this one. This one's more transparent than this one. And now fill is a little bit trickier because if I click on this other Steph again and go to fill, it also looks like it does kind of the exact same thing. So what we're going to do is go up to text. I'm going to show you one other thing you can do to your layers by right-clicking over here. So if you right-click, you can get a bunch of other options in here. And we're going to go to the very top to blending options. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are a whole bunch of things you can do to your images or text or shapes or anything. You can add a drop shadow right here. I have it on the text right now. You can do a gradient overlay to your text. You can do a whole bunch of things. If you click on any word, so you click on the word gradient overlay, you can then come in here and actually click and mess with the actual gradient. So you can change each individual thing by clicking on the actual word. So we're going to go up to stroke right here, click on the word stroke. That's an ugly outline right here. So first of all, I'm going to change the color. I'm going to go in here and click OK. I'm going to get rid of that gradient overlay and the drop shadow. And then I'm going to change the size right here of the outline to have it make more sense. So maybe something like that. And I'm going to click OK. Don't worry about the pink because that's exactly what we're going to do here with fill. So now we're going to come back to fill for a second, click on that, and you can see that it's going to get rid of just the inside and it left the stroke on the outside. So fill is, getting rid of part of a layer and then keeping the adjustment or stroke or whatever on the outside. Now, as you can see, I've changed text to Steph Curry, and even though I just showed you stroke and then fill, how to get rid of the inside there, I'm going to go back to each layer and bring the fill back up. And then I'm going to go back into, I'm going to double click on stroke so it brings me back into the layer styles. And I'm going to do a color overlay and just have it as white. And on this one, same thing, double click, color overlay, click OK, and leave them as white. It's not the greatest, but it'll do for now. And I guess this would be a good time to show you a few of the other things that you can do when you right click on a layer. So not right here, but actually to the right over here. If you right click, we saw blending options already. We saw duplicate layer already. You can delete layer. You can group layers. There's a bunch of other things that you can do in here. The only one I'm going to really show you is this one, convert to smart object. And I'm going to go up to one of these instead. So this, maybe the top Steph 3 here, right click. And if you convert to smart object, boom, you can see that it applied the mask to that one. And now it's got this little icon in the corner here. This one down here had it, the one that we place embedded from the start. If it doesn't have it, it's a raster image. And when it does, it's a smart object. So we can actually double click on that layer and you can see it opened up a new tab up here. And that actually has the original mask still in it. So you can do some stuff in here. You can add more layers and mess with this one. For example, I'm just going to do this really quick. If I add, let's say, a curves again and, increase the contrast of this like crazy, and then I close this. So now when I close this one, it says, do you want to save those changes? If I say yes, it'll then apply them to this one contained right here within this smart object. And if you don't like that, then you can just go back in by double clicking into the smart object and, hiding or deleting, getting rid of that layer. And then when you close this again, it's going to ask you to save, yes, and it'll be back to what you had before. Just know that if you try and draw on a smart object, so if I go over to, let's say, the brush right now, you can see I can't actually do anything. If I try to put a gradient on there, I can't actually do anything. It'll say, no, you can't do that. So if you do want to manipulate your layer, your image, your text, or anything like that, where you actually want to do one of these things over here, then you can right click, and then the opposite will be here now. Instead of convert to a smart object, you can rasterize the layer, and that'll bring it back to just a singular thing. So now when we double click on this, it's not going to do anything but bring up your layer style. There's no more smart object thing over there. So you basically applied whatever you had onto that layer, and it's now rasterized. It's now just one singular thing, which means we can now actually go over to that brush tool, and since it's a rasterized image, we can actually draw on it and do whatever we want, including putting on a gradient if you actually wanted, but you probably don't. The last thing I'm going to show you in this right-click drop-down menu thing is create clipping mask. To do that, though, I'm going to take this gradient and drag it above Steph 3. So what we've learned so far is because this gradient has this screen blend mode on it, it's affecting everything that's below it. But what if you didn't want that? What if you just wanted gradient new to only affect Steph 3, for example? That's why I put it here right above it. So if you wanted that, now all you have to do is right-click on that gradient and select Create Clipping Mask. And now you can see that the gradient is only affecting Steph 3 and no other layer or anything below it because it's clipped to just this layer right here. To get rid of that, all you have to do is right-click and release Clipping Mask. And then I'm just going to move this back down here. Oh, and just so you know, this right down here, effects, this is also kind of those same layer style things that you got in the drop-down menu. So if I go to Bevel and Boss here, you're going to get the exact same menu that pops up. And right here, this is a mask. So if I click on the mask, you'll see that it'll put a white box beside your layer right here. And all this means is whatever's white here, you'll see your actual image exactly how it is. And anything that's black on this mask will be see-through. So I have a brush right here that's black. So you'll see if I paint over Steph here on that layer, you'll see that there's a black blotch that's added onto the mask. and then Steph is gone. You can flip it right here to white and paint them back in, or Command or Control Z to go back. Just know that if you're selected on the actual thumbnail layer, like not on the mask here, on the thumbnail, and you paint with the color or whatever here, even if it was black, it would be black and you're painting right on the image, not on the mask. So just be careful with that. Which brings us to the final things that I want to show you about layers, which is just how to merge layers. So if we go to the very top layer and you go up to layer, you can go down here. You can see a bunch of options that we've already kind of talked about in here as layer styles, whatever. But if you go down to the very bottom, you can go to group layers, which we already showed here, which was adding a group there, which means you can go Control G. So for example, if I wanted to combine these two into a group, I'd select one, hold Control or Command, click on the other text, and then I can go up to layer and then down to group layers, or just go Command or Control G, and you'll see that it'll make a group there. I'm going to call that Steph name actually. And you can see that both those two text things are now into that group. You can also select multiple layers. So like I showed you before, I'm going to click on the top one, hold Shift, click on this. So I've selected these four now. And I'm going to go up to layer, and I'm going to go down here to merge layers, or Control E. So I'm going to do Control E instead. So Command or Control E. And that now merged those ones that I had selected into one layer right here. So now that is destructive. So that's done. Like it's combined together as one thing. So if you were to undo that, you should do it right now, right? If you didn't want to do that, then Command or Control Z to undo it. But in my case, I want it, so I'm going to go Control Command E to merge them again. Having said that, there is a way to merge your selected layers or all layers into a copied merge layer. So it doesn't get rid of your original layers, it just copies them into a merge layer above. So to show that, I'm going to select the top one, hold Shift, select everything to do with Steph down here, and we're just going to go Control Alt E. And you can see that that made a Steph 3, so that just because it was the top layer here, Steph 3 merged. Now I have a copy of all of this into a merged layer, but still kept the originals. Whenever I do that, I take that one out of the folder though, and then I can close this folder down and hide it. Now we can apply other effects to this final kind of image merged together, like let's say filter, camera raw filter. So if we go in there, we can now apply this whole filter to the entire image instead of just to one piece at a time. So if you increase the contrast, I'll do something dramatic, like if you increase the vibrance or the clarity, texture, whatever, you can enhance everything all at once. Click OK, and it'll apply it to this layer instead of doing it to each individual layer, like I said before. And if you wanted, you can do it to your entire image by going up to the very top, going to layer, and you can also either merge visible. So let's say you had a whole bunch of things hidden like this, or something else. You can merge everything that's visible by Shift, Control or Command E, or you can flatten the entire image by clicking this one, and that just boom, it's going to say discard hidden layers. If you don't want those, click OK, and it's going to flatten it all down into one singular layer. I'm going to undo that for a second, because you can also do that by going Command or Control, Alt or Option, Shift plus E, and that'll merge everything that you have that's visible into one layer at the very top. Sort of like we did before, but that does every single thing that's visible. And that's it. That's all I got for layers in Photoshop. If you got something out of this video, make sure to drop a like. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, and I'll catch you next time.